let's come away from the stage here in this friendly tavern. We'll move over to the fire. Get a little bit away from where all the musicians are playing. Yeah, there we go. All right. Very good. Now, welcome everybody to Monster Monday. My name is DM Gallibond, and tonight on Monster Monday we are going to continue our look at the monsters from the Strixhaven campaign. This time we are looking at the Oracle of Strixhaven. The Oracle is connected to the university, and it comes to us out of Magic the Gathering, but it's mentioned and given a stat block in the campaign. However, it doesn't appear in the campaign at all. All right, so the Oracle of Strixhaven is an individual, and there's only ever one Oracle at a time. And in the Magic the Gathering expansion for Strixhaven School of Mages, the card is a double-sided card featuring Jadzi, the Oracle of Arcavios, on one side, and Journey to the Oracle on the other side. Now, Jadzi is a human wizard. She's never mentioned by name in the official fiction that was produced for the expansion. Her title, Oracle of Arcavios, is mentioned once in one side story that was created, and the side stories are additional fiction that is not part of the main expansion storyline. So, mentioned much more frequently is a building on the Strixhaven campus called the Hall of Oracles, where statues of all the past oracles are displayed and revered. So, in the Magic the Gathering game, Jadzi is a legendary card, and it allows you to play additional cards whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell during your turn or during another player's turn, just by turning over the top card from your library and possibly by paying a marginal cost of 1 additional mana. In addition, if an opponent tries to remove Jadzi from play, you can discard a card and bring the card back to your hand instead of having it go to your graveyard. So meanwhile, Journey to the Oracle, which is the flip side, allows you to play any number of land cards in your hand onto the battlefield as a sorcery, and then discard a card to bring it back to your hand. So it seems like this particular card is very useful in a deck that causes you to draw a lot of cards and then recycles cards from your graveyard to your library, so that you always have cards in your hand and you never run out of cards in your library. So that was a strategy. I think they used to call that milling back in the days when I played Magic the Gathering. I'm not sure if it still has that term or not to refer to that strategy. And here are the two sides of the card. So as you can see, Jadzi, Oracle of Arcavios, is an 8 casting cost creature, 5/5, a human wizard, legendary, and by paying 4 mana, 2 of which must be green, you can flip it over. And by the way, out of the 8 casting costs, 2 of those must be blue. So you would probably put this in a blue-green deck, I am imagining. So then Magecraft, whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a non-land card, you may cast it by paying 1 rather than paying its mana cost. If it's a land card, put it into the battlefield. So this is one like you just start flipping over cards, and if the top, like let's say 4 cards, I guess it's only 1 card. You only get to do 1 card at a time. All right. Yeah. See, I haven't played this in a while, so here I am thinking it gives you a bunch of free mana. Probably does not. All right, and then anyway, we have the artwork of Jadzi here, and then the artwork of the waterfall. And as you can tell, this little construct here at the top of the waterfall is the same thing that's behind here. So journey to the Oracle means going up these hills and getting to the top of this waterfall. And the art, like most of the two-sided cards that we've looked at from the Strixhaven set, artwork is by the same artist on both sides. In this case, it's Christopher Ron, or Chris Ron. Okay, so origins of the monster in D&D. Oracle does not appear in the Strixhaven campaign, but she's referenced in the introduction. As with most of the monsters we've seen, pulled from the expansion D&D campaign uses the same name and artwork from Magic the Gathering card. Now, the Oracle is said to be the wisest and most accomplished mage in the world of Arcavios, which is the world in which Strixhaven is set. And there's a curious connection between the Oracle and the Archaics, which are beings that we've already profiled in this series on the Monsters from Strixhaven campaign. And we'll see more of that when it comes to the description and the lore. So now here again is the artwork from Journey to the Oracle. So we get this description in the Strixhaven campaign about the Oracle. Somewhere in the lands beyond Strixhaven's borders lives the Oracle, a wise and accomplished mage tasked by the founder dragons to ensure that the magic of Strixhaven is used to help others and not twisted to evil ends. The one who holds the mantle of the Oracle must not only understand the fundamental truths of magic, but also possess impeccable wisdom and unshakable virtue. The current Oracle is an elderly human named Jazzy, a graduate of Quandrix College. Jazzy has since expanded her studies to encompass all disciplines of spellcasting, tempering the mathematical abstraction she wielded at Strixhaven with benevolent divination and a return to the basics of magic itself. So that is the description of her that we get in the campaign. Now, the lore we get is a little bit more extensive. So, Oracle is the wisest, most accomplished mage in the world of Arcavios, selected by the founder dragons. Oracle's lifelong task is to ensure that magic is used to help people and not twisted to evil ends. To be the Oracle, one must understand fundamental truths about the nature of magic, know and wield hundreds of spells, and possess impeccable judgment and virtue. So mysteriously linked to the Oracle, Archaics are wise, giant, long-lived beings with an innate talent for magic. They can be seen striding through the wilds, exploring sources of magic with their many arms, or contemplating existence through their eye, which functions as a magical focus of some kind. Scholars seek out Archaics for their vast knowledge of history and magic, but Archaics tend to communicate in obscure allusions and cryptic metaphors. And then we get a little bit of lore into how these two beings are connected. So few people know that Archaics existence is listed to a time-warping phenomenon involving the Oracle. When an Oracle dies, their mind and spirit is swept off to the distant past, drawn backward through time toward the intense magnetic power, or the intense magical power that brought the world into being. So splinters of that Oracle's soul and its fragmented memories coalesce into a creature, a newborn Archaic. Every Archaic alive today was born at the dawn of time from the mind of someone who has lived and died, or who will one day live and die as an Oracle. Archaics speak in cryptic allegories not only to tease and test the eager minds of the young mages, but also to cleverly sidestep time paradoxes. So basically, what they are doing here, Mr. Ms. DM, what they are doing here is they are introducing creatures that they're never going to put in the campaign. Furthermore, creatures that have a bunch of timey-wimey bull poopy going on. So that if you ever want to introduce an Archaic into a campaign, you have to figure out, clever DM that you are, you have to figure out how this creature has a vast amount of knowledge, but how it's going to relay that knowledge in specific riddles and cryptic clues that your players will have to rack their brains to decipher. So have fun with that. Now, that is if you want to use them as written. Obviously, you can use them some other way and be fine. Your table, your rules. Do what you want. But I think that's a very interesting way they have connected these creatures. And obviously, as we saw a few weeks ago when we looked at the archaics, those also came out of Magic the Gathering, and they were really not referenced that much. To my recollection, they weren't referenced that much in the fiction, but they're kind of there, and somebody on the Magic side of the house had the idea that these guys were connected. So, certainly makes for some interesting homebrew opportunities if you want to uh, have these monsters in a homebrew setting that are all part of the same array of creatures. And by the way, we're going to look at that a little bit later. All right, so just like all the other students and staff and faculty we've seen from Strixhaven, the Oracle is a humanoid. All right, and we've already talked about how the Strixhaven campaign creates or contains many different races that are unique to the or that are contained from the Magic the Gathering side of the house, and also a lot of races that are from the D&D side of the house. And we've talked about how there are some new playable races coming up, and I'm kind of curious to see whether those are all going to still be humanoid or not. All right, now we're going to go and we're going to take a look at the Oracle as it comes from D&D Beyond. All right, so in D&D Beyond, we see that the Oracle of Strixhaven is a medium humanoid, human wizard, neutral good, armor class 12 or 15 with mage armor, 150 hit points, speed of 30 feet, fly speed of 15 feet. A stat array that's surprisingly not all that crazy. I mean, it's definitely tilted above average, but there's only one stat that's above 20. And strength, dex, and con are above average. Charisma is really good. Wisdom and intelligence are both very high. So then the saving throws, the special skills, no damage immunities, but immune to being charmed or frightened, a passive perception of 20, and knows all languages. And notice it has a CR of 15. So it's a pretty healthy, high level monster, as we will see when we talk about using it in encounters. Now, the creature does have legendary resistance, so 3 times a day can choose to succeed on a saving throw if they fail. Then, as for actions, has multi-attack, so makes 2 magic flare attacks, which are melee or ranged spell attacks, plus 10 to hit, reach of 5 feet or range of 60 feet, 1 target, 3d12 plus 5 force damage. Then there's a recharging ability called a Paradoxy. So momentary warps in reality appear at 3 different points the Oracle can see within 120 feet. And each creature within a 20-foot radius centered on that point must make a DC 18 saving throw. On a failed save, the creature takes 6d10 force damage and is pulled up to 15 feet in a straight line toward the center of the sphere. On a successful save, the creature takes half as much damage and isn't pulled. The creature caught in the area of multiple warps is affected by only one which the Oracle chooses. So, now we have seen from the artwork this Oracle up on a ledge of a big waterfall. You can imagine that if somebody wanted to try some um, any funny business, she might do the paradoxy and position it in such a way that it would pull that person, if they fail their saving throw, right off the edge of that waterfall and then just woo, let them fall all the way down. So that's a interesting thing you can think about doing with that ability. Now, spell casting, and again, I'm gonna say it. I think this Strixhaven. I thought it was going to be the next source book, the Mordenkainen, or yeah, I think the next Mordenkainen source book is the next one that comes out later this month. I think that one was the one where they said they were going to change up the way that they present spellcasting creatures, but I'm getting the sense that they baked that into this one as well. And I'm not sure I really like it, because they told us in the description and they tell us up in the lore that the oracle is supposed to have command of hundreds of spells and is supposed to know all kinds of spells, but they give us a very short spell list, and there's only one at will spell and several spells you can use twice a day, and then several spells you can use once a day. Now, the reasoning that they gave last fall at the D&D online or D&D Days event that I saw last fall, they gave a reasoning so that it would be a little easier for DMs to sort of choose what actions or what spells the creature might use. And I guess some of the feedback they got in 5e is there's a bit of paralysis or paralysis by analysis if you have a whole list of all of the cantrips, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, whatever level spells that a caster has available, that it takes a while for DMs to go through that and figure out, okay, in this scenario, what would be the best thing? Well, that is a valid concern, but to that I say, as a DM, plan a little better. Once you've been playing with a group for a while, if you have the same kind of players, you kind of get to know what their favorite tactics are. So if you're going to put a monster in an encounter, make notes to yourself. Say, my players are probably going to want to be able to do this. So look at their spell list ahead of time and say, what kind of spells do they have that would be good against, these creatures? What would really mess them up? I mean, in my Sunday game, for instance, I know that the very hard hitting players or the very hard hitting characters tend to have a little bit of a low wisdom. So anything that you can do that's going to try to mind control them can be very effective against them. Now, of course, they try to find ways of mitigating that. And then that sort of sets up this dynamic. They start to know, well, all right, there's a lot of psionic using creatures in this area. They're probably going to try to dominate somebody. So let's see what we can do to try to mitigate that chance that our barbarian is going to get dominated. Because we don't want the barbarian turned against the party. And uh, and then there's some other tactics they like to do. And if you think about what those players like to do and you want to make it challenging, then you can figure out with a full wide array of spells what would be a good opening move, what would be good if the party, let's say, then uses their tendency to deal fire damage or their tendency to deal cold damage, or they like to put up their walls of force, or whatever it is that the party tries to do. Or the party likes to banish people so they can get them off the battlefield for a little while and deal with other, you know, deal with other people on the battlefield. So I'll be curious when Mordenkainen comes out if they follow this kind of thing, but I'm not really a fan of them dumbing down or streamlining the spellcasting ability of a creature like the Oracle that's supposed to have a huge repertoire quite so much. You guys tell me, let me know, put in the comments here, or if you're watching later on YouTube, put in the comments on the YouTube whether you think it's a good idea for them to streamline this down so much, or whether you would like a larger array of spells. Now, in the lore, since they tell us that the Oracle has command of hundreds of spells, you, as a DM, are perfectly within your right to go through spell lists and then figure out, well, what would a wizard with 20 hit dice and a 21 intelligence, how many spells would that wizard be able to cast? And you can create an entire spell list, and you can maybe even customize it, because you might say that this oracle, because of some of their other abilities, they may know that the party is coming, and they may have watched the party for a while. They may know what the party's capable of, so they may be planning ahead for this encounter. So think about that as an option if you're going to use the Oracle in your campaign. Now, another ability or another action that the Oracle can take is teleport. So the Oracle teleports along with any equipment she's wearing or carrying to an unoccupied space you can see within 60 feet. Now, legendary actions. Remember, legendary resistance is X times per day. In this case, it's 3 times per day. Legendary actions are X time per round. And in this case, it's 3 legendary actions per round. However, it has to be at the end of another creature's turn. Not on her turn. It's got to be the end of somebody else's turn. So the options available to the Oracle are Vector Shift, teleport 1 creature she can see within 60 feet of herself along with any equipment, and bring that to within 30 feet of herself. And an unwilling target must succeed on a DC 18 Charisma save to avoid the effect. Spellcasting, so can go back to the spellcasting well and cast one of the spells on her list for 2 legendary actions at the end of somebody else's turn. And then a Vortex Jaunt causes 2 actions. So the Oracle uses teleport, and immediately after she disappears, each creature within 30 feet of the space she left must succeed on a DC 18 Constitution save or take 3d10 force damage. So it's basically like I vacate this area and bam, I cause, it's force damage, but it's almost like it's like an more powerful version of what is it, the Shatter spell that deals thunder damage. So it's similar to that, except I guess that you could flavor the Vortex Jaunt as not having the loud banging noise like Shatter does. All right, so let's go back and take a look at the rest of our slides here. Okay, so how might we use the Oracle of Strixhaven in our encounters? So we've already seen the Oracle is a CR 15 monster. So that means if our party is level 10 or level 11, then putting the party up against 1 Oracle is a hard encounter. So if the party is level 12 to 14, it becomes a medium encounter. If you want to make it a hard encounter for a level 14 party, you can add any 1 Strixhaven professor to the encounter. And then from level 15 to level 19, it's an easy encounter. And if you want to make it a hard encounter for a level 19 party, you can add any 2 Strixhaven professors, which are, again, we looked at those in the faculty last week. All right, now if you are a player, what are some tactics you can use against the Oracle of Strixhaven? Well, number one, be strong. One of the Oracle's recharging combat abilities can move up to 3 people and deal force damage with every use if those PCs fail a DC 18 strength save. Number two, be hardy. One of the Oracle's legendary abilities can deal force damage to every creature within 30 feet when she teleports if they fail a DC Constitution save. Number three, be magnetic. Another one of the Oracle's legendary abilities can teleport an unwilling creature closer to herself if they fail a DC 18 Charisma save. Be resistant. So it goes without saying the Oracle is a powerful spellcaster, so resistance to damage from spells is helpful when facing her. And finally, something I didn't put on there is remember you're fighting a legend. So she has those legendary resistances and the legendary actions that she can use. All right, now if you are the DM and you are going to put an oracle into an encounter, and you want it to be a potential or definite combat encounter, then here are a few things you should think about. Number one, plan ahead. As we saw with the professors, the Oracle has some spells that she may use before combat, mage armor, and some of the other spells like that are things she might use before combat. So if the Oracle is setting an ambush for the PC, she may prepare mage armor ahead of time. She may also use her scrying ability to give her some insight on what they plan to do or what their capabilities are. So use that to your advantage. Remember, you are the DM. You know what they do in every encounter because you played with them through every encounter. Think back to that knowledge. Think about what their favorite tactics are. And then let this Oracle be a smart opponent who, either through direct scrying or through indirect means, has learned about the party and is kind of prepared for the little tricks that they like to play. So number two, use a big opener. So depending on the initiative roll, a good opener for the Oracle might be her Paradoxy and Stun combo. If she's early in the round, she can use Paradoxy to deal force damage to and move up to 3 PCs to a position that is more advantageous for her. Then at the end of another creature's turn, she may use a legendary action to drop her Power Word Stun spell on one of the biggest damage dealing martial characters. So once again, if you have like a big beefy fighter, but that fighter doesn't have the greatest wisdom or intelligence or anything, just nail them with a Power Word Stun and see if you can knock that guy out of the fight for a while, or at least make them spend a few turns trying to save out of that stun, and handicap the party a little bit. So then finally make contingencies. So play out several versions of the battle ahead of time, thinking about what your players like to do and how they work together in combat. So the Oracle is supposed to be the wisest mage in the world. If it stands to reason, she should have a great command of battle tactics and might set up the location she chooses to fight the PCs, as well as any other things within her control. She might try to do that to limit their ability to use their favorite tactics. So think about what might really hinder or handicap the PCs and throw the Oracle, have the Oracle set that as the location that she wants to bring the PCs to in order to have the fight. It is, it's like this is one of those monsters that requires a lot of thought, not only when you're going to put them in a campaign, but where you're going to put them in the campaign and how you're going to set up the encounter if you want to have it be a combat encounter. Now, if you have a heroic party and you are playing the Oracle as written as kind of a benevolent thing, then it's less likely that the encounter is going to be a combat encounter. It might be a conversation encounter. But then, if you're going to plan to have that conversation disrupted by other enemies coming in and the PCs having to fight them, and maybe the Oracle having to join in that fight, again, plan what would the Oracle do? How would the Oracle, work in that particular environment? Oops. Okay. I screwed that up. Okay. I'm sorry, folks. All right. Campaign placement. So, the Oracle of Strixhaven is a solid Tier 3 and Tier 4 opponent for a party of adventurers, especially if she has allies fighting with her. In the Strixhaven campaign, she never appears, and she's supposed to live out in the world beyond Strixhaven's borders. So, in the past, as we've looked through some of the other humanoid denizens of Strixhaven, the first year student, the second and third year students, the faculty, etc., we have imagined the Strixhaven population of students and faculty as part of an antagonistic organization that may challenge the PCs all the way from level 1 up. So Oracle would definitely be upper management in this type of magic wielding cult or magic wielding organized crime syndicate. So if you run a campaign where where the Strixhaven population acts as the antagonist against a party, the Oracle might well be the boss monster if the story tops out at Tier 3, or the Oracle might serve the Archaics or the Founder Dragons if the campaign is supposed to go all the way through Tier 4. Alright, now reskinning the Oracle. So, Strixhaven, this is going to look familiar because we're continuing the theme from last week. Strixhaven's a complete society presented to us as in a campaign setting. And we have looked at the students, we have imagined them as foot soldiers and squad leaders or street lieutenants in an organized magical opposition that might harry your PCs throughout the entire campaign. So last week we got close to finishing our organization with faculty. Now I said I would want to step up the CR for Deans a few notches and give them a larger spell list and some more combat abilities than professors to make a clear distinction between the professors and then the Deans above them. So if we imagine all of these individuals as part of the big bad evil organization, be it a magic cult, a crime syndicate, or an evil army of some kind, then the Oracle would be the top general of the army, the Don of the Mafia family, or the CEO of the Evil Incorporated. But every CEO, we have to remember, reports to a board of directors that has the power to shuffle the organization and make changes. So, in the case of the cast of Strixhaven monsters, that means that the Archaics, which are CR 18, would be above the Oracle. And then perhaps even above them, pulling the strings of maybe the Archaics, would be the Founder Dragons, which range from CR 22 through CR 25. So this gives us such a really well layered organization that you could take that as a fantastic evil incorporated or evil crime syndicate or evil cult even, and start with your demigod, your god, your prophet as one of the founder dragons, and then just sort of work your way down until you get to those first year students as the foot soldiers in in the organization. And then maybe even pull in some other non-humanoid monsters as well. We'll be taking a look at some more monsters along the way in the next few weeks. All right, that's going to take us to our Q&A now. I don't see any questions right now on the monitor, but if you do have any questions on the Oracle, go ahead and put them in while I go through the announcements and the ending. All right. Thank you for joining me. I've been DM Gallibond. This has been our look at the Oracle of Strixhaven on Monster Monday. I do have 3 other streams that I do most weeks. We have some disruptions again this week coming up because of more conflicts. Sorry, last week we wound up having some disruptions that I had forgotten about, so we only had the one game Wednesday. I think this week coming up, I think we're going to have the Wednesday game and the Sunday game. I believe it's a Saturday night game that there's a conflict this week. So Walker of Waterdeep is our Planeswalking 5th edition game. They are in a plane that is based on Arabian Nights from Magic the Gathering, and they are fighting monsters that are inspired by 2nd edition Dark Sun. So it's a real mashup of a campaign, and they are working their way through a ziggurat and trying to defeat the plans of the evil King Suleiman. All right, and then on Wednesday night, we have our Sword Coast Chronicles. That is our homage to the published 5th edition campaigns. Oddly enough, we are just wrapping up our time in Strixhaven, which is going to become sort of a recurring base, if you will, for the PCs now that they've reached a certain level. And they are being mentored, if you will, by some legendary wizards from the Circle of Eight, namely Adaluk, Tensor, Mordenkainen, Leomund, and Bigby. So these 5 members of the fabled Circle of Eight are on the campus of Strixhaven and doing research, and they are just now sending the party off to the jungles of Chult to try to figure out what the Circle of Eight's ancient foe and nemesis Acererak is doing, building a temple under the lost city of Omu. And the party is going to have to go through that city and go through that complex that was built underneath the city and try to stop the Soul Engine, because they're going into the campaign storyline for Tomb of Annihilation. So join us on Wednesday nights to see how that goes. Then Saturday night is our 2nd edition old school game. It's Saturday Night Greyhawk. They are going through the original Temple of Elemental Evil. All of those games are live on Twitch. All of the archives of Monster Monday and all of those games is available on YouTube. We do have a Patreon if you want to help us out. See if there's any content that or see if you want to help us create new content. All right, next week we are going to be looking at the Auric. And the Auric is set up as sort of the BBEO, Big Bad Evil Organization, that is in opposition to Strixhaven within the Magic the Gathering set and within the campaign. So we're going to take a look at their members. Now, just today, I had a request from on an old Monster Monday. I had a request to do a monster, another demon, or a devil, I should say, and that is Amon the Wolf. So I did a little bit of looking this afternoon when I saw that, and Amon the Wolf is a very interesting creature. Not only that comes out of literature and everything, but also was introduced in a Dragon magazine by Gary Gygax himself back in the 1980s, and we can talk about the publication history and see how he might be used. So, probably not next week, but I'm going to say sometime in May we might have a look at Amon, which would be before we get to the end of the Strixhaven monsters. So, thank you for that suggestion. And remember that I do take suggestions for monsters to cover on Monster Monday. All right, that's gonna do it. Now, if you're watching the archive on YouTube, I'd really love it if you would subscribe to the channel, like the video, share the video, and click the post notification bell so that you get notified every time new content drops. And if you are watching on Twitch, please subscribe to the channel or follow the channel. And that way you'll get notified every time we go live with a game or when we go live with a stream like Monster Monday. All right. And then one more thing to remind you of: on Friday, we will be having a Lore Friday drop. And Lore Friday this week is going to be about Gold Whisker Warrens, which is another part of Blingden Stone, because we are going through all the adventures that come from the Out of the Abyss campaign. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Really hope that you have a good evening. I am going to now go over to. I'm going to bring the music back up, and I'm going to go over to the Twitch, and I'm going to see if anybody else is doing some. Oh, that's right. Different software on this. All right. I don't have the ability to do raid set up yet. All right. Gotta set that up for next week. All right, everyone. Thanks so much. Talk to you later. Take care. And good night. And remember, watch out for the monsters under the bed.